The end of the career and the end of the life is when you're dead.
This morning, where legendary actress Diane Keaton has died at the age of 79, sending shockwaves through the industry and among fans. The Oscar-winning actress, best known for her roles in Annie Hall and The Godfather, passing away in California.
A few days ago were tough for Hollywood and her fans. The morning Diane Keaton died, Hollywood didn't explode. It went quiet. It was just a simple, heavy truth that one of its most genuine souls was gone. She'd spent her life avoiding the noise, and somehow even her exit felt perfectly her. Understated, graceful, unforgettable. But what came after her passing surprised everyone. Behind her wit and odd charm was a legacy and a fortune, bigger than anyone imagined. Her family, they sure are left with Keaton's massive wealth. The final curtain. Diane Keaton passed away on October 11, 2025, at her home in Los Angeles. She was 79. Her family confirmed her death through a brief public statement, thanking fans for their love and asking for privacy during what they described as a deeply painful time. The statement didn't include details about the cause of death, and to this day, no official explanation has been released. According to reports from People and Reuters, emergency services were called to her Los Angeles home that morning. She was transported to a nearby hospital, but efforts to revive her were unsuccessful. Friends close to Keaton later shared that her health had declined very suddenly in the weeks leading up to her passing, though she hadn't made any of those struggles public. Throughout her life, Keaton had been open about past health challenges, including a battle with bulimia during her early Hollywood years and occasional concerns about skin cancer. However, none of these have been directly linked to her passing. News outlets such as The Times of India and The Economic Times noted that while she had overcome personal hurdles, she remained active and engaged until the final months of her life. Within hours, social media turned into a stream of tributes. Clips from Annie Hall, The Godfather, and Something's Gotta Give flooded timelines. Fans posted old interviews where she laughed mid-sentence, those unfiltered bursts of joy that made her seem more like a friend than a Hollywood legend. It wasn't just actors and directors mourning, it was everyone. Meryl Streep wrote, "No one made ordinary feel this extraordinary." Al Pacino called her the most honest person I ever met in front of a camera. Even younger stars, like Emma Stone and Saoirse Ronan, shared how Keaton's individuality gave them permission to be themselves in an industry that often rewards conformity. The tone of the tributes said everything. People weren't mourning a celebrity. They were saying goodbye to someone who made fame feel human again. News outlets revisited her career like flipping through an old family album. From Kay Adams in The Godfather to Annie Hall's unpredictable brilliance, Keaton had this uncanny ability to be magnetic without trying. She wasn't the kind of actress who demanded attention. She earned it by simply being present, authentic, and oddly fearless. In a way, her passing hit differently. It wasn't sudden, but it left a strange emptiness, the kind that comes when someone who shaped culture so quietly is no longer there to remind us how it's done. Outside her Los Angeles home, a few fans left flowers, letters, and bowler hats, her signature symbol. One note simply read, "You made awkwardness beautiful." That was Diane Keaton. She never fit Hollywood's mold, and maybe that's exactly why she became timeless. As tributes kept coming in, one question began to surface, not about her death, but about her life. How did a woman who never seemed to care about luxury end up leaving behind a legacy and a fortune that outshone most of her peers? Real estate, royalties, and reinvention. For all her charm and eccentricity, Diane Keaton was no fool when it came to money. Behind the oversized hats and self-effacing humor was a woman who quietly built a financial empire, piece by piece, home by home, project by project. She may have played the dreamer on screen, but in real life, she was one of Hollywood's most strategic investors. Keaton's estimated net worth at the time of her death hovered around $100 million, though friends say she never cared for the number itself. Diane liked beautiful things that told stories. One longtime associate said, "She didn't collect for status, she collected for meaning." Her real estate ventures alone could fill an entire book. While many stars bought vacation homes or extravagant mansions, Keaton treated every property like a canvas. She bought old, forgotten houses, crumbling Spanish colonials, dusty farmhouses, and derelict Los Angeles estates, and restored them with reverence and detail. Architecture became her second language. In the 80s, she renovated a series of vintage homes in Beverly Hills and Pasadena, reselling them for millions. Later, she took on entire neighborhoods, championing historic preservation in Los Angeles long before it became fashionable. Her eye for design eventually earned her recognition as one of the city's most influential architectural advocates. Her coffee table books, including California Romantica and House, became bestsellers, blending photography, storytelling, and the soul of old California architecture. But it wasn't just the homes. Her acting career, spanning over 50 years, brought consistent royalties from classics like Annie Hall, The Godfather Trilogy, Manhattan, Father of the Bride, and Something's Gotta Give. Even her later films, such as Book Club and Palms, became sleeper hits, appealing to an older audience Hollywood often ignored. Keaton also diversified early. She invested in art, photography, and production, a rare move for actresses of her generation. Her production company, Blue Relief Productions, helped her maintain creative control and profit participation in select projects. She also earned residual income from book deals, brand partnerships, and voice work, though she famously turned down several high-paying endorsements because she didn't like selling things that didn't feel honest. To her family and close friends, her wealth wasn't about extravagance, it was about security and legacy. She was deeply practical, preferring old denim and thrifted coats over luxury brands. Her joy came from restoration, not acquisition. She'd rather spend weekends sanding floorboards or repainting shutters than walking a red carpet. Even in her will, it said she left behind a carefully planned estate, not just money, but properties, archives, and rights carefully divided among her 2 children and charitable trusts. Her legacy wasn't the typical Hollywood fortune born of excess. It was built on curiosity, craftsmanship, and care. For Diane Keaton, reinvention was never about starting over. It was about refining what already existed, whether it was a house, a career, or herself. And that, more than any award, is what truly made her rich. What makes all of this especially remarkable is how quietly she managed it. She never flaunted her wealth. She didn't chase expensive brands with logos. She didn't build a headline-worthy mansion with gold faucets. Her spending was thoughtful, restoration rather than replacement, authenticity rather than trend. It was old Hollywood wealth done with restraint. To understand the scale, contemporaries like Meryl Streep or Goldie Hawn also possess significant wealth, often magnified by high-profile endorsements, blockbuster salaries, and multimedia branding. Keaton's fortune may have been somewhat smaller in raw numbers, but her approach meant less public spectacle, more lasting value. Her estate wasn't about big splash purchases, it was about assets that endure. Homes, rights, memories, love, family, and who inherits it all. Despite a life in the spotlight, Diane Keaton's closest bonds were deeply private. She never married, but in her 50s, she became a mother, adopting 2 sons, Dexter and Duke. The decision came later than most, but it felt right to her. Friends say she spoke often of motherhood as a form of freedom, not bound by convention, but chosen consciously. Her relationship with Dexter and Duke was rooted in presence rather than performance. She wanted stability for them, choices, and love unburdened by the glare. She taught them to appreciate art, architecture, books, and the value of thinking, restoring, creating. She didn't aim to leave them showy gifts. She aimed to leave them foundations. As for her estate, unlike many celebrities who become fodder for rumor and inheritance drama, Keaton reportedly arranged things with clarity. While full details aren't public, filings and trusted sources suggest her will allocated real estate, copyrights, royalties, and residuals among her children and possibly trusts or charities she supported. The assets weren't just financial. They included rights to film royalties, photographic work, property deeds, and architectural archives she collected over decades. But for Diane Keaton, her fortune was never truly about money. It was about freedom. Freedom to say yes to passion projects, to walk away from roles that didn't feel honest, to preserve old homes instead of tearing them down. It was about stability, the ability to give her children roots, choices, and a life with fewer compromises. Her circle of friendship also shaped her life and legacy. Colleagues like Warren Beatty and Jack Nicholson weren't just big names on a credits page, they were part of her community. Those friendships laughed with her, challenged her, supported her through quiet moments in between films. Off-screen, away from the scripts and the spotlights, what kind of woman was Diane Keaton? The woman behind the roles. Before she was the turtleneck-wearing icon of Annie Hall or the sharp-witted matriarch in Something's Gotta Give, Diane Keaton was Diane Hall, a girl from Los Angeles who dreamed loudly, dressed differently, and never really fit in. Born on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles, California, she was raised in a modest, middle-class household. Her father, Jack Hall, worked as a civil engineer, while her mother, Dorothy, was a homemaker with a creative streak. It was Dorothy's scrapbook-winning entry in a beauty contest that first showed Diane what storytelling, even visual storytelling, could do. She would later say her mother documented life before people called it art. Keaton's upbringing wasn't glamorous, but it was full of imagination. She loved music, drama, and anything that allowed her to express herself. By the time she attended Santa Ana High School, she was already performing in plays, known for her quirky humor and a laugh that filled the room. After a short stint at Santa Ana College, she moved to New York to study at the neighborhood playhouse, chasing the dream that had been whispering to her since childhood. People who knew her then said she wasn't the loudest or most confident person in the room, but she was curious, endlessly curious. She studied other people, their mannerisms, the small details they took for granted. That sensitivity became her superpower as an actress. When she landed her breakthrough role in Annie Hall, it wasn't just her performance that stood out, it was the authenticity. Woody Allen famously said that the role wasn't written for her, it was her. The mismatched clothes, the rambling charm, the hesitant speech, that was Diane. Off-screen, she was every bit as unconventional as her characters. She never married, choosing instead to adopt 2 children in her 50s, a decision she described not as brave, but as finally growing into who I was meant to be. Friends called her introspective, sometimes shy, yet disarmingly funny. She collected hats, photographed abandoned buildings, and filled her journals with musings about aging, love, and faith. In a world that often rewards conformity, Diane Keaton made a career and a life out of doing the opposite. She didn't just play characters who were complex, awkward, and real. She was those things, and that's what made her so magnetic. Her performances weren't about pretending, they were about revealing. Even decades into her career, when Hollywood often sidelines women past a certain age, Keaton reinvented herself again and again. She became a director, a photographer, a writer, an advocate for architectural preservation. She was proof that artistry didn't fade with age. It deepened. And for those who worked with her, the thing they remember most isn't the Oscar or the fame or even the fashion. It's her warmth. She made you feel seen, one longtime friend once said, even when the camera wasn't rolling. What money can't measure. For all the numbers that can be attached to Diane Keaton's life, box office totals, awards, real estate valuations, none of them come close to measuring what she actually left behind. Her legacy isn't one of luxury or excess, but of taste, integrity, and the courage to remain unmistakably herself in a world that constantly tried to mold her into something else. It's almost impossible to talk about Diane Keaton without mentioning her style, not just the clothes, but the attitude behind them. The oversized men's suits, the bowler hats, the wide belts cinched over blazers, the crisp white shirts buttoned to the throat. Her look was androgynous yet romantic, structured yet free. It wasn't created by a stylist or a fashion house. It came entirely from her. What began as her natural preference for comfort and individuality became one of the most recognizable aesthetics in Hollywood history. When Annie Hall premiered in 1977, audiences didn't just fall in love with the film, they fell in love with her. Suddenly, department stores couldn't keep up with requests for the Annie Hall look. It was quirky, it was effortless, and most importantly, it was real. While other actresses wore gowns designed to impress, Keaton wore what made her feel like herself. "I always felt like a misfit," she once said in an interview, "so I figured I might as well dress like one." That unapologetic individuality became her superpower. For women watching from afar, especially those told to look or act a certain way, Keaton was a revelation. She made intelligence, awkwardness, and authenticity fashionable. She proved that femininity could be funny, sharp, and unpredictable all at once. And she made it look easy, even when it wasn't. Her influence rippled through generations. Emma Stone, when accepting an award early in her career, once called Diane Keaton the definition of gutsy elegance. Anne Hathaway described her as the woman who taught us all that being weird is a kind of grace. Even Reese Witherspoon credited Keaton with teaching her that being serious about your craft doesn't mean you have to take yourself seriously. Those tributes came not just from admiration, but from recognition. They saw in Keaton what they hoped to become, artists who could be bold without being manufactured. In an industry that often treats aging like a flaw to be hidden, Diane Keaton redefined what it meant to age gracefully. She didn't chase youth. She embraced time. She allowed wrinkles to exist, gray hairs to stay, laughter lines to deepen. She aged with the same curiosity that defined her youth, finding new projects, new roles, and new ways to express herself long after Hollywood's conventional prime. Films like Something's Gotta Give and Book Club didn't just give her new audiences, they gave her the chance to tell women everywhere that joy and love aren't reserved for the young. When asked once about getting older, she said simply, "I'm not trying to erase who I've been. I'm trying to keep meeting who I'm becoming." That was the essence of the Keaton effect, the quiet revolution she sparked without even meaning to. She made authenticity fashionable. She made aging look like another form of art. Fashion houses, from Ralph Lauren to Celine, have credited her influence for decades. Her preference for layering, her gender-fluid tailoring, even her minimalist color palettes, all became mainstays of modern fashion. Yet Keaton herself never seemed to care much for trends. She was, as one designer put it, the accidental icon of individuality. But her influence went far beyond wardrobes. It lived in her approach to success. Just as her films aged gracefully, so did her fortune, built not on hype or endorsements, but on substance, patience, and taste. Her financial story mirrors her creative one, a slow build rooted in instinct and sincerity. She didn't need to be everywhere at once. She just needed to be authentic where she was. That consistency became her brand long before branding was a thing. You could see that balance in how she approached fame. She was gracious but guarded, approachable but never overexposed. She attended premieres and awards, yes, but she didn't chase headlines or court chaos. Her legacy thrived precisely because she never confused visibility with value. It's a lesson many in the modern entertainment world are still trying to learn, that sometimes the most powerful statement is restraint. Diane Keaton's creative choices reflected a deeper philosophy about life itself. She understood the importance of contradiction, of being both playful and serious, bold and vulnerable, grounded and a little bit mad. She wasn't afraid to laugh at herself, to admit her flaws, to show that confidence and uncertainty can coexist. That honesty made her magnetic. And it's that honesty, more than any wardrobe or award, that keeps her influence alive. You see it in the new generation of actresses who wear suits on red carpets, who refuse to apologize for their quirks, who bring humor into roles that might once have been written flat. You see it in the writers and directors who craft stories for women that are funny, flawed, and fully human. You even see it in architecture enthusiasts who cite her books as their first exposure to design as storytelling. Money can measure a lot of things, but not this. Not the way she made people feel seen. Not the way she gave women permission to exist outside of perfection. Not the way she turned awkwardness into allure and independence into art. So when people talk about Diane Keaton's wealth, the millions, the homes, the royalties, they're only talking about one kind of legacy. The other kind lives quietly in every woman who dares to show up as herself, every artist who chooses substance over spectacle, and every soul who still believes that aging doesn't mean fading. Keaton's greatest investment wasn't in property or film, it was in authenticity. And that, unlike houses or paychecks, never loses its value. The younger, Keaton Diane. Keaton was born long before fame, long before the hats and the laughter. Her childhood was ordinary by most measures, but it carried the quiet seeds of creativity that would later define her. It was her mom who first taught Diane that stories could live in ordinary moments. She filled scrapbooks with family photos and little captions, documenting life in a way that made even grocery trips look cinematic. Growing up in Santa Ana, Diane was surrounded by sunshine and suburbia, but she never quite fit the mold. While other girls were learning how to be polished, she was busy being curious about movies, about people, about the strange music of human behavior. She'd sit on her porch and watch neighbors walk by, studying their gestures, their voices, their unspoken quirks. That instinct to observe, not just see, but notice, would later become her greatest tool as an actress. At Santa Ana High School, Keaton joined the drama club, finding in the theater a kind of home she hadn't known she was missing. The stage gave her permission to be as big or as strange as she wanted to be. She wasn't afraid to look foolish. She found beauty in it. After graduation, she briefly attended Santa Ana College, studying acting before moving to New York City to chase the dream that had been building quietly inside her since childhood. Her move to New York wasn't glamorous. She lived in small apartments, worked odd jobs, and took acting classes at the neighborhood playhouse, one of the city's most respected training grounds. It was there she learned the discipline of the craft, the importance of truth in performance, the balance between vulnerability and control. But even then, she didn't want to be like everyone else. While her classmates aimed to embody elegance or sensuality, Keaton leaned into the awkward, the hesitant, the real. That bold refusal to conform set the tone for everything that came next. Long before she won an Oscar, before Annie Hall changed film forever, Diane Keaton was already building the person she would become. One observation, one risk, one imperfect, beautiful performance at a time. What keeps an artist's flame alive when the spotlight starts to dim? The career that never stopped evolving. Diane Keaton's story in Hollywood began not with a bang, but with a stage light. It was 1968, and she was a young actress trying to make her mark in New York City. She joined the cast of the original Broadway production of Hair, the countercultural musical that defined a generation. Keaton, ever the nonconformist, was the only performer in the show who refused to appear nude, a decision that made her stand out in the best possible way. It wasn't prudishness, it was principle. "I didn't think being naked was necessary to say something true," she later explained. That small act of independence, quiet but firm, set the tone for the rest of her career. Her Broadway work led to a meeting that would change everything. Woody Allen, then an emerging comedian and playwright, cast her in his play Play It Again. Sam in 1969. The chemistry between them, intellectual, comic, electric, was undeniable, both on stage and off. When the play was adapted into a film in 1972, Keaton reprised her role, bringing her natural humor and timing to the big screen for the first time. The performance drew attention from critics and casting directors, and Hollywood suddenly took notice of this quirky, wide-eyed actress with a voice like laughter and thought colliding. But the world truly met Diane Keaton in 1972, when she stepped into the role of Kay Adams, Michael Corleone's girlfriend and later wife, in The Godfather. Surrounded by a cast of giants, Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, Keaton held her own. Her character began as an outsider to the Corleone empire, but ended up trapped inside it. And Keaton played that transformation with aching restraint. Francis Ford Coppola saw something in her others hadn't yet, a softness that hid steel, a normality that made the tragedy more real. The Godfather was a phenomenon, and though Kay wasn't the flashiest role, Keaton's performance left a mark. She returned in The Godfather Part 2 with more weight, more heartbreak, more presence. In one of the trilogy's most haunting scenes, Kay telling Michael she aborted their child to break the family's cycle of violence, Keaton's trembling defiance became the emotional core of the film. It was fearless, and it cemented her as a serious actress in a male-dominated era. Then came 1977, the year that changed everything. Annie Hall. The movie, written and directed by Woody Allen, wasn't supposed to define an era. It was supposed to be a small romantic comedy. But Keaton's performance, a mirror of her real self, awkward, witty, vulnerable, radiant, turned it into something larger. Annie Hall didn't just win her an Oscar for Best Actress, it shifted American culture. Her offbeat humor and vintage style, those loose vests, baggy trousers, and men's ties, became the look of the late 70s. She was no longer just a star, she was a movement. The 80s tested her range. She played opposite Warren Beatty in Reds, a sweeping political epic that earned her another Oscar nomination. She portrayed complex women, artists, lovers, intellectuals, each layered with contradictions. In Shoot the Moon, she gave one of her most underrated performances as a wife, navigating divorce and disillusionment. Critics saw in her something rare, emotional truth that didn't need to be loud to be devastating. Through the late 80s and into the 90s, Keaton reinvented herself again. She stepped into lighter, yet equally thoughtful roles in Baby Boom, where she portrayed a corporate executive suddenly caring for an orphaned baby, one of the first films to explore the modern woman's struggle to balance ambition and motherhood. Then came Father of the Bride, and its sequel, where she became everyone's favorite on-screen mom, warm, slightly neurotic, and endlessly relatable. Even as Hollywood's interest in women over 40 waned, Keaton's career refused to fade. She began directing, showing that her eye extended beyond acting. Her directorial debut, Heaven, was an experimental documentary about the afterlife. Later, she directed Unstrung Heroes and several TV films, proving she had a storyteller's soul. The early 2000s brought another defining chapter. In Something's Gotta Give, opposite Jack Nicholson, she delivered one of her most iconic late-career performances, playing Erica Barry, a playwright who rediscovers love and desire in her 50s. Keaton radiated intelligence, sensuality, and vulnerability. The role earned her yet another Oscar nomination and a Golden Globe win. But more importantly, it shattered one of Hollywood's longest-standing myths that women of a certain age were past their prime. Diane Keaton made middle age not just visible, but magnetic. From there, she leaned into stories that celebrated maturity without apology. Because I Said So, Morning Glory, The Big Wedding, and Book Club, a sleeper hit that reunited her with contemporaries like Jane Fonda and Candice Bergen. The film wasn't groundbreaking, but it was joyful, and that joy mattered. It reminded audiences that humor, romance, and reinvention don't expire with youth. Through all these decades, Keaton remained prolific, curious, and unboxed. She wrote several books, part memoir, part artistic exploration, including Then Again, a heartfelt reflection on her mother's life and her own evolving sense of identity. Her 2014 release, Let's Just Say It Wasn't Pretty, was pure Keaton, witty, self-deprecating, insightful, filled with reflections on beauty, imperfection, and the endless process of becoming. She also became an advocate for preservation, not just of old homes, but of ideas, memory, and craftsmanship. Architecture became her second passion, almost a second career. She photographed abandoned buildings, restored historic properties, and published design books that blended storytelling with aesthetics. 5 years ago, Diane Keaton had become something beyond an actress or even a celebrity. She was a living reference point for authenticity. Younger generations who'd never seen Annie Hall still recognized her instantly. The white shirt, the hat, the laugh. She'd evolved from muse to mentor, from Hollywood icon to cultural touchstone. Her later years were marked by selective projects and quieter living. She appeared in Book Club, The Next Chapter, a light-hearted sequel that felt like a reunion between old friends. In interviews, she spoke less about fame and more about gratitude for her children, her art, her solitude. "I never wanted to disappear," she said once. "I just wanted to live without noise." And that's exactly what she did. From 1968 to 2025, Diane Keaton's career never burned out. It simply shifted shapes, finding new ways to exist without losing its soul. She didn't just act. She observed, she interpreted, she humanized. She gave audiences women who were messy, witty, flawed, intelligent, and lovable, women who looked like us, sounded like us, and made us laugh at ourselves. In a business built on reinvention, she managed to do it with grace and humor, over and over again. That's her real magic, not the Oscars or the fame, but the fact that for nearly 6 decades, Diane Keaton made being yourself not just enough, but extraordinary. Diane Keaton's death is more than her fortune. It's about her legacy. Subscribe for more untold Hollywood legacies like hers.